I wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking all about bioidentical hormones. This can be part of your fertility toolkit. So, we're going to be talking about when is the best time to actually use the hormones, what you need to do alongside with the hormones, what type of hormones to look at, and how to really know if this is the right move for you. And then there's a lot of misinformation about hormones and related to different cancers and the risks there. So, we're going to be breaking all of this down today on today's episode. Let's go. Hi, Dr. Rosensweet. Excited to have you on the podcast.
Hi, Sarah Clark. Honored to be here.
Awesome. So, can you share with us your journey and really how you came to do this work?
I love medical school, and in my senior year, I started wondering, gee, is there anything else that relates to healing? And got interested in what eventually started to be called holistic medicine. And I was looking at nutrition and exercise and the relationship of emotions and the mind to health. And I delivered babies at home for the first part of my career until I eventually concluded that that was just not safe enough for the general population. It was too risky. So I stopped doing that. And then about 30 years ago, a patient of mine in my holistic practice, she came into the office extremely upset. She told me she was going crazy, which I thought was pretty unusual because she was in her mid-40s, and this woman was so brilliant. She had retired in her mid-40s. Think about that, retiring in your mid-40s. Yeah. And I had serendipitously, shall we say, been speaking to a world expert on progesterone, and I gave her some progesterone. And 3 weeks later, I get this letter that, oh my God, I can't believe it. This stuff is I'm myself again. It's just amazing. And that really caught my attention, but I didn't really ever guide my practice. I started seeing more and more women who had hormonal issues. And it was a really good fit for me because I really was interested in the biology of hormones. And so I just went on to specialize in it. And that's what I do. That's how I spend my time doing, is treating with compounded bioidentical hormones.
Excellent. Well, excited to chat with you today because we see many people that have low AMH and high FSH, diminished ovarian reserve, premature ovarian insufficiency. Been told that donor eggs are the only option. They may have done multiple IVFs, IUIs before coming to see us, and then no one's kind of dug deeper. And so bioidenticals can be part of the solution, and sometimes but it's for us it's really important to work on the targeted diet and lifestyle changes, and we use functional lab testing and more. So it can be part of the solution. So I wanted to talk about this today to get your expertise on this, because there's a lot of misinformation about bioidenticals and HRT in general. So first of all, why would someone who is trying to conceive consider bioidenticals?
Well, I back it up like you've already suggested that you do, is how in the heck at a time that they want to conceive do they wind up with low ovarian function?
Yeah.
And this is a well understood phenomena from my perspective. I mean, the ovarian hormones have a double duty. They're there for all the female functions and a multitude of them, and the brain and the arteries. It's just there's hormone receptors in almost every cell in the body. They're so crucial. But the double duty is that they can be recruited for the fight or flight biology if called upon to do so. And if you put too many demands for fight or flight, let's recruit your estrogen and your testosterone, for example, your ovaries can't keep up with it. They just can't keep doing it. Like when we're watching the Olympics and we see these women athletes, a lot of them are on such horrendously rigorous training programs that are very stressful to them. And they're recruiting their ovarian hormones to participate in this maniacal training program. Pardon the editorial there. and they're not menstruating. They don't have enough of the estrogens and the testosterone, for example, to do the female functions and the fight or flight. And the fight or flight biology is a higher priority. Our beings recognize that as life-threatening, saber-toothed tigers type attack type stuff. So you do that day in and day out, and you deplete your ability to produce at the level of estrogen and progesterone as far as the hormonal aspect of fertility goes. So the hope is you intercept this early enough and acquire the information, tools, and support to be dealing with the emotions and the stresses of life in a much more functional way that doesn't trigger the alarm response, the fight or flight response, and all the biological cascade of that. And you get to use your estrogens and your progesterone, progestational, for primary female functions. So because I'm just not an expert, I'm definitely spent 30 years of my career treating women in the perimenopause and early menopause, and I've definitely run into ovarian failure, premature ovarian failure. And we can replenish those hormones to the extent that you'll even see some women start menstruating again, to their delight. And so your question was around, we're replenishing the hormones in the hopes that we'll get the general hormonal system healthier. Mm-hmm. And so how do you replenish hormones? Well, you are probably familiar with some ovarian stimulating techniques. I'm not a tremendous fan of some of the medications used there, mm-hmm. Clomid and clomiphene and stuff, yep. Where you can trigger the ovaries to come back online, or you can replenish the hormones. And what would you want to replenish hormones with? Well, ideally, you just want to replenish them with the same molecule that's produced in the ovary. Well, these have been available for about 60 years. The original birth control pill had a form of estradiol in it, the most potent of the women's estrogens, that was derived from plants, from soy and from yam. So the pharmaceutical manufacturers owned the soy fields, derived a precursor called diastenin from them, and converted them in a very elegant fashion to the same molecule that the feminine ovary puts out. There are other choices. You could use horse urine-derived estrogens. Not my favorite. I never prescribed it. And my experience with women is, if you can dial it in for the individual woman according to her own innate balance, that's when the best work is being done. And that's a process. And I describe that process for the perimenopause and the menopause, not for fertility issues, in our book, Happy Healthy Hormones, which you're going to make available, I hear.
That's right.
So why bioidenticals? Well, if you're going to be replenishing hormones, which I'm a wonderful advocate for, when there are reduced hormone levels, we don't function well. These are the most powerful biochemicals in our body, and male or female, we don't do well when these things start to decline. But we have the opportunity to replenish them. So what would you choose? That's a facetious thing to say to you, Sarah. Mm-hmm. I know. I don't. You're going to choose the very best thing available, and the same molecule that your ovary put out, derived from plants, as opposed to a lot of the pharmaceutical alternatives. If the only thing I had in my tool bag was pharmaceutical alternatives, I would use them. But it's been 60 years since we've had to rely on those. These compounding pharmacists in the United States and Canada They get the pure hormone, pure estradiol, pure estriol, pure progesterone, same molecule. And they put it up in creams and gels. And in our system, we use organic oils. We love the organic oil delivery system. And so I don't know if that answers your question well enough, but why bioidenticals? Because why try and invent a new human being? This work has been done. Why not just copy nature, as my friend and colleague Jonathan Wright suggests? Just copy nature.
Yeah, that like so yeah, so I was diagnosed with premature ovarian insufficiency at 28. I had both my kids with donor eggs. Years later, discovered, food sensitivities and gut infections and chronic stress. And at the time, I didn't even think I was stressed. Obviously, you're talking about the fight or flight. That was me. And we see this all the time, right, with people in their early 20s, early 30s, sorry, late 20s, early 30s with premature ovarian insufficiency or primary ovarian insufficiency. And then no one's kind of digging deeper. And for me, in my early 20s, I had like irregular cycles. I had hot flashes. I literally was joking, oh, I'm having a menopausal hot flash. No, that actually was a menopausal hot flash. It was no joke. And then the irritability and I dealt with that for years. And then was able to make these targeted changes with a diet and lifestyle, and also using some hormone replacement therapy. So yeah, let's kind of talk about so you're talking about, I think, so the HRT, which people are typically recommended, more of the synthetic versus the bioidentical, has got a really bad rap. Back in, I think there's like a study, was it 2002? Can you kind of talk about that? And people panicked. Everyone went off the HRT and said, my goodness, I'm going to get breast cancer and things like that. So can you just speak to that study and the worry and the stuff around this?
That is probably the most important question that is relevant these days. And if I may, could I return to it, because you made me think of something else that's really critical.
Yeah.
And I don't know the exact role it plays, but we're living in this new era where there are so many chemicals that we're exposed to. And what do these chemicals tend to be attracted to inside the female and the male body? Hormone receptor sites. So, because I've never delved deeply into the testing of young women with premature ovarian failure, I know that the receptor site issue is huge. And part of any program to see if you can revitalize and get normal ovarian function again, this day and age, has got to include detoxifying. And it's outrageous. You'd think it was all you got to do is explore the subject a little bit, and you see the chemicals that we're exposed to, and they act like hormonal disruptors. And this morning, I was reading a post from a friend of mine who's written a book on hormone disruptors, published in the early 2000s. And we saw that the alligators in Florida in a lake were changing sexes because the lake had become so polluted with these hormonal disruptors. The chemicals are acting in some artificial way, interacting with estrogen receptor sites, progesterone receptor sites, and really changing the whole ability for normal hormones to go there. I suspect that your program is very rich and emphasizes detoxification, because it would be one of the first things that I would address in any woman who was having fertility issues that suggested that she was getting into irregular periods. Who knows? I mean, perhaps her ovaries are producing the right amount of hormones. This can be tested. But the hormones can't work because the receptor sites are occupied by these toxic chemicals. And of all things in the world for them to have an affinity to, hormone receptor sites, that's what they do. So detoxification In this day and age, it's got to be something that has to be thought of. I'm not saying that anyone who's infertile or has having fertility challenges, let me put it that way. We don't know that you're infertile.
Right.
We just know that you're having fertility challenges. You would definitely want to explore the subject of toxicity. And it's not like you're going to run across a medical history log. I was fine, and then I swallowed 82 gallons of gasoline, and then I'm not fine, and my periods got irregular. That's not that gross. The chemicals that we're exposed to are subtle, and there's just so many of them. So, for example, if you're not eating organic foods, all food was organic up until about 100 years ago. You're exposed to these toxic chemicals that are used as herbicides and pesticides, and they're in the food. And you don't taste it, but they're in there. Some people can tell, though. Some people are so sensitive, they do taste it. There's that, and there's all the household products that are strong enough to clean your kitchen counter or your toilet. How much strength does it take to clean your toilet? These are very strong chemicals. So one of the things we do, and you probably do it as well, is we have someone do an inventory of everything in their house that they're exposed to that doesn't belong there. And life gets cheaper. You don't have all these crazy products. We've got it down pretty much to baking powder and vinegar as far as our cleaning, what we love for cleaning. None of those other things. So I wanted to mention that. Now I want to go to the elephant in the room. Women have been receiving hormones, and men, for over 1,000 years. The Chinese figured it out 1,000 years ago. They had young women go into outhouses and collect their urine, and they dried that urine out, and what was left behind included hormones, and the aristocracy was given the hormones. And then in the 50s, the pharmaceutical industry caught on to this, and instead of using human urine, they started using pregnant mare urine, horses, and they produced a product called Premarin, pregnant mare urine. And there were so many women in the United States, 40% of the women in the United States in menopause were on Premarin or Prempro. 40% of the women in menopause, 18 million American women. And then along comes the study that you referred to in 2000, and it was false. It was a false study. It was falsely reported. In the study itself, there was no statistically increased incidence of breast cancer. But they forgot about that sentence where it said it's statistically insignificant, and they said there's increased risk for breast cancer. And it scared women and healthcare providers all over the planet. And the 18 million American women who are on hormones dropped to the low millions, 1 or 2 million, overnight. Well, it was false. It caught my attention in 2002, but I read the study and I went, wait a minute, they're saying statistical insignificance, and this is horse urine-derived estrogen. And even with the horse urine-derived estrogen, there's less of a risk for breast cancer. It's right there in their study. It was just with this Prem Pro product that had a statistically insignificant, that was there, but it was too late. The press had done it, and you couldn't put that cat back in the bag. Well, the original study committee kept following up on those women, and 18 years later, they published in the same journal, the Journal of the American Medical Association, that after 18 years of follow-up, there is no increased risk of breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke. Hardly anyone's heard of that. Everyone's heard that there's, quote, increased risk. Well, here's the science. Let me get down to it. And then I'll give you a reference for those who are really interested in finding out the medical details. But we're all at risk for thousands of diagnoses. Some of them are not good. we're all at risk for hundreds of cancers. As a male, I'm at a special risk, increased relative risk for prostate cancer, and there's definite reasons why that's so. Women are an increased relative risk for breast cancer, and there's absolute reasons why that was so, and it wasn't so when I was in medical school, but now it is. However, given that basic fact, women who are treated with hormones are at less risk for breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke than women who are not treated with hormones. That's the science. There's more to that story, but that's the one I'd like to ring through your audience. Women who are treated with hormones are at less risk for breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke than women who are untreated. That's the science. It's in the chapter 3 in the book that you could download, the book I wrote, I cover that in more detail. And I turn people who want to know more information about it to an excellent reference written by a breast cancer specialist and oncologist. The book is called Estrogen Matters. 450 medical references. You get to learn that the medical facts are we're all at risk, but the risk is less if we're treated with hormones. So to antidote that poison, there's a few of us going around the country saying this. False by their own omission. Well, it's a slow moving train to help antidote that fear.
And so what about, so let's kind of just get into, and we'll have a reference to that study in the show notes for people. They can check it out. And also we've got the link to your book at the end of there as well. Let's talk about, what about, so how, as far as to apply let's kind of get into the nitty gritty here with the hormones. So we've decided that the hormones are right for us. And now how do we select one? Is it preferred oral or transdermal? Like what's your take there on some of those things?
Well, I'm going to give you an unusual answer or entrance into that question. That a woman's job who's got hormonal issues is to go shopping until you find a healthcare provider that has had extra education and training in using compounded bioidentical hormones, loves it, specializing in it, best case. That's your job. You can learn a lot. You can learn a lot from reading our book, but what hormones to choose, how to balance them for each individual, well, I outline that in the book, but ultimately you need someone to write a prescription. And best case scenario, especially if you're trying to get pregnant, is to find an expert. How easy is that? Not so easy, but they're out there. And we've been speaking to physicians in Canada, including someone in Toronto. And maybe you could contact Sherry or Karina, and we could get that name. We have someone in BC, and we have someone in Toronto who's really getting interested in our program. But that's the job. Go shopping until a woman finds, number one, a healthcare provider that they like and trust and is easy to communicate with, and who's had the extra training, has the interest. That's the job. They will help you dial in topical, what stuff to use, how much to apply, what the individual dosing is, because it varies enormously woman to woman. That's the thing. We're so individual. Like some women, let's say they need this level of estrogen to be young and fertile and conceive and carry a pregnancy. Other women to be young and fertile and be able to conceive and carry a pregnancy, they need 3 times as much estrogen. Both of these are young and healthy and, quote, normal. There's a wide variation in the hormones and the hormonal balance. And you got 4 hormones here. You got the estrogens, you got progesterone, you got testosterone, and DHEA, minimal. And then often when there's infertility issues, we definitely want to have an expert in thyroid. Because sometimes at the foundation, the hormonal foundation of the trouble is that thyroid. So you want someone who really understands the thyroid more than we were taught in medical school. Now, estrogen and testosterone, in my opinion, should only be given topically. There's reasons for it. Estrogen, when it was given orally, like in the birth control pill, what did we learn? A certain small percentage of the women, excuse me, excuse me, got blood clots in their legs or even in their lungs. And it was from the oral estrogen. When you apply estrogen topically, you don't have that risk. So why in the world would anyone want to take estrogen orally when you got a small but significant risk of getting a blood clot? And there's reasons for it. You got to give higher doses orally because when you take something orally, it goes to the liver first. A lot of it gets metabolized. You start producing liver proteins that enhance inflammation and coagulation. Don't take estrogen orally. End of story. Now, a lot of people get away with it, but I don't understand why they would ever want to do that, knowing what we know. Testosterone is not safe orally, and a lot of women need testosterone. Oh, yeah. Progesterone you can take orally. Progesterone is safe orally. But estrogens and testosterone should be taken topically.
Yeah, and so as far as like someone on the fertility journey, and then obviously they want to get pregnant, and they've started sort of making those targeted diet and lifestyle changes because our thing is you can't just do the hormones alone. You still got to, like you're talking about, the detox. You're exposed to like 85,000 chemicals. It's really important to to minimize or eliminate your exposure as much as possible. So based on symptoms, so if someone's coming in and they're like dealing with libido issues and hot flashes, and they're just not really functioning that well, and then you find a lot of like back and forth on the anxiety, depression piece, and then sometimes trying to be able to make these changes, it's just like, oh my goodness, complete overwhelm, and then throw the hands in the air, and like the stress is at a maximum. So we take a mind, body, spirit approach to this. So with the hormone piece, where would you say to bring it in? Almost, again, it's like probably a personal thing, right? Where someone's like, sometimes people just want to try to do this naturally until maybe they need a kickstart with the hormones. But what's your kind of take on that?
Well, by the time someone's in duress and it seems obvious that they're running on insufficient hormones, I say for health issues alone, address the hormones. They're so powerful that if you don't address them, it's hard to get other things accomplished. Like they play into metabolism, the amount at which you produce energy. Everything is functioning on energy. How do you get an immune system to be really vital and vigorous? It needs a lot of energy. And so the rate at which you are producing energy needs to be deeply addressed. And the most powerful influences on that energy are the hormones, not the only ones. So I would mostly address, if a young woman came into my office and she was having irregular periods, I'd want to address possible cause, which is often the elephant in the room, tremendous stresses and the inability to have the information, tools, and skills to do well with the stresses. I'm not saying get rid of the stress, although we'd like to sometimes. Stress is a natural part of life. And if we're skilled, if we know how to deal with it emotionally and mentally, and through the choices we make, we grow, become wiser, more loving. So it's not the stresses, it's does someone have the information and tools and support to really deal successfully? Because what's going to throw off the ovaries and the testicles most? It's either poison or it's the excessive dysfunctional response to the stress of life in which you're constantly triggering fight or flight biology. So the medicine becomes get good at the stress of life so you're not triggering these huge outpourings of cortisol and adrenaline and demanding that the ovaries contribute to your increased energy needs. Well, isn't that interesting? This whole crisis of infertility is in best case scenario driving us towards our own personal growth, our own personal healing of our emotions, mind, and life. And anyone who's begun that journey or is deep into that journey knows how challenging it is and how rewarding. And we live in a time in history where the human race needs to embrace this healing of life and the emotions and the consciousness and the choices we make and how we're dealing with each other. We're up against it. So I think it's pretty interesting. And medicine is often the driving force. I mean, as a young doctor, is it okay that I'm sort of going on and on here?
No, I think it's powerful. It's really because I think many times people were like the type A, go, 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 all these degrees, more, more, more. And then we do the same thing for the fertility thing. We just keep going and going. And when we do the testing, we see people's adrenals flatline, cortisol, so it's showing there black and white. So the piece of the mindset and the stress piece is huge. So yeah, keep going.
How did those adrenals flatline? They were overused through a lifestyle and a lack of having an emotional skill level to not overuse them. Well, as a young doctor, I used to think, well, someone's coming to me because they have diagnoses and they're ill. So it's my job to get them so that's not happening. Well, that didn't work. I wasn't able to institute in every case the perfect cure. And what I started to do is I started to pay attention. Well, what's really going on here? Just to try and come up with something that did work. And my observations led me to believe this, that the last resort is the body, in the sense that if we're not living in a way that is ideal for life itself, we're going to start getting feedback. We're going to start getting thoughts and feelings that ultimately are going to tell us something's going wrong here. But the issue is this. Our being wants the real answer. It doesn't want, well, this is a penicillin deficiency or it's a Valium deficiency. It wants the real answer. And by the time we're getting into illnesses or significant dysfunctions, such as not being able to get pregnant, your being is calling out for the real answer. And I see over the course of my career, I've seen couples get diverted into, well, this is a fertility issue. And they miss the point. The fertility was the breakdown needed. The fertility challenges were the breakdown, and there was an intention behind that breakdown. And the breakdown was to get the couple to go, oh my God, what's going on here? And the problem is the right answer. And that, oh my God, what's going on here is the whole human race is getting this upsurge of unhealed feelings and thoughts that leads to terrible choices and behaviors that have got our planet right on the brink of extinction. And the issue is we as individuals are the only way out. Me addressing my own healing process was the only way I could even begin to help somebody else. And I got propelled, launched, catapulted into my healing process in my early 30s. So I was very fortunate. Isn't that interesting? That's probably coincides with a lot of the women that you're dealing with that are having infertility issues. Only I got plunged right into the heart of the matter. I got my repression mechanism lifted off to be able to experience the uncomfortable feelings and the unbeneficial thoughts that I had sequestered and repressed. And what did I need? The information and tools to heal my mind and my emotions, and thus my body, because we're multidimensional. There's nothing that takes place on any level of our being that isn't simultaneously taking place on every level of our being. And the causes are almost never physical. That ovary is not working, but the ovary didn't cause it. Something drove that ovary into fatigue, metaphorically. What was the driver? Well, part of the challenge is we don't know what we don't know. We may not be conscious of we don't know, but very often a crisis takes place that's so strong that it breaks us open. And we get a sneak preview of the fear and the sadness and the anger and the shame and the guilt and the emptiness and the loneliness and the meaninglessness that derives from separation from our own heart and soul and connection to the divine. That's the short version. We've done a series called I Wonder Doctor. I Wonder Doctor, iwonderdoctor.com, which is a series of videos. And I go into this in the anxiety and depression section. For one of millions of approaches to getting good at emotions and the mind. If you get good at your own emotions and mind, you get good at relationships. If you get good at relationships, your chance of producing a love child increase enormously. Oh, but you got to have love first. You got to know what that's about, because it's going to take a miracle if you're not easily conceiving. Well, what miracle does the child want? Child wants you to be reasonably at home in yourself and with a reasonable amount of connection and love and friendship and wonderful relationship. That's what the child wants to be born into. So you got to prepare the nest by healing. Thank you for letting me go on and on there.
I think that's so important, though. It's like really because people get, oh, I want the biochemical. Tell me the thyroid. Look at the adrenals. You got the gut. Let's focus on our gut. Give me the testing. Equally as important, like we were saying, to like the first of all, even though your REI may have told you, you're going to struggle. This is not going to work. That that may have, like, those words may be embedded in your subconscious, where like deep in your heart, like that. The moment you started trying, you already are parents, that now is a time to mother yourself or parent yourself. Now is a time to, and then to listen to that voice, not someone else's voice of being, that you are fertile. And, sometimes that can be, this whole, IVF in the fertility industry will perpetuate this panic and complete impatience and worry, and that it's never going to work. Whereas, if you start to really trust yourself, which is key, and then you sort of you're listening to this podcast right now for a reason. And, we're here talking about bioidenticals, but we've gone into talking about things that are actually going to help your reproductive health, which you're focusing, for me, it was literally, I kept going and going and going and doing more and more and more. And I actually felt fine, but my body was not. And then I started getting colds and flus, and I took heaps of antibiotics, and I just said, give me an antibiotic because I got to get back to work. And that's ridiculous stuff that I look back, I'm like, what the heck was I doing? And just so out of touch. And now, healing's not linear, and we're all on our own healing journey. And it is to, each day you do a little better. And if you see yourself slipping back into those old patterns, it's like give yourself a shake. But I think it is important to get a guide and reach out for help, because a lot of these emotions, it's like some strong stuff you could be dealing with, right? For me, it came out as anger. I'd just be pissed off, and I'd just be, I didn't go into the sadness or any of that, because that was too hard. I was just angry. Yeah. So, okay. So someone with back to the bioidentical side of things. So what are there any mistakes you see around with bioidenticals? Anything you kind of want to share there? Anything?
Well, fortunately, for the most part, if you get too much, you're going to feel lousy because these are so strong.
Yeah.
So you'll think something must be wrong with the treatment because I feel worse. So there's these built-in safety factors. However, that's not entirely true. 75% of women are going to experience symptoms if they're underdosed or overdosed. Because you don't want to underdose and you don't want to overdose. But 25% are not. So it's not a foolproof way of going about it. All I can say is the women that are happiest have sought out the care of someone who that's what they specialize in. And it isn't necessarily going to be your gynecologist who is fantastic at surgery and procedures. And they're so important to us, but they're not necessarily lovers of hormones. Pretty rare. They do exist. We have some in our program that we've trained that are gynecologists. But you have to really query the office and say, does your physician have specialized interest in hormones and treating with compounded bioidentical hormones? If they're not treating with compounded bioidentical hormones, it'd be unlikely to me that they've delved deep into the world of hormones. So that's a criteria you can use. If they're not using 24-hour urine hormone testing as a testing mechanism, it's unlikely that they're at the level of experts. The experts sooner or later gravitate to the testing method, which is the best reflection of what's going on when you're treating a woman. Those are a couple criteria that you can use. Or you can read our book, Happy Healthy Hormones. You'll get an idea of what the roadmap looks like in dealing with a woman in perimenopause and someone with premature ovarian hormones. By definition, you're in perimenopause or menopause. So you get an idea of whether you're working with someone who is really taking a special interest in getting these hormones right and individualized for you. The individualization is really critical.
And is there anything that you are personally obsessed with right now, be it a book or a website, an app, a documentary, anything that you just kind of wanted to share with the listeners that you think would be beneficial?
Obsessed?
Yeah, something that you're loving right now.
Interested in?
Sure.
Well, and I'm very blessed in the world of medicine. Our main interest is in teaching and training physicians and nurse practitioners to get excellent. And our focus is on that. And I love teaching and I love seeing people get really good at this. And I am a strong advocate of compounded bioidentical hormone treatment for everyone whose hormones are going awry, as everyone's will. Midlife, we're living a lot longer than we did 200,000 years ago. And we're living into the era when our hormones go awry, men and women. And these are so powerful that I'm a strong advocate of replenishing them as early as you can figure it out. And if you figure it out late in your 80s, replenish them then. Whenever you figure it out, they make a world of difference. I mean, the biggest thing is, how do women get into assisted living facilities and nursing homes? Loss of hormones, 80, 90% of them are there because they lost their muscles. They can't walk or stand with stability. So they wind up in wheelchairs. They lose their bladders, lose control of their bladders. That's what moved them out of the home into nursing homes, where they lose their cognition. So I am passionate about helping people get through the false information that these hormones are bad for you. They're great for you. They're amazing for you. And they reduce your risk of breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke, and prostate cancer. Reduce your risk. So that's such a big deal.
Absolutely.
That's what I care about. And we're on a big mission to see every human being on the planet in midlife and beyond on hormones so we can function better. How do you get to be kind and accepting and beneficial and synergistic when you're irritable and you've lost half your mind?
Been there. Yeah. And so your book, Happy Healthy Hormones, we'll have the link in the show notes. And I think you kind of had some final thoughts there, but anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up for today?
I don't.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. And as I say, we'll have some of those links in the show notes. Thanks a lot, Doctor.
You're welcome, Sarah. Thank you.